Hi, welcome to Daiku Game Pitch, where we feature game designers showcasing their new games. Today we welcome Rel. We be best known for PlanetSide 2, which is a video game, and now Rel is going to be here to talk about Distal, which is a merciless D20 fantasy game. So, Rel, thank you for coming.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
So I've had all kinds of technical difficulties today, so if I'm a little bit disheveled, now you know why. But Rel, pleased to have you on the show. I know we're going to be talking about Distal, but first of all, as always, tell us, how did you get started in role-playing games, and maybe even a little bit of background as to why you're transitioning from video to role-playing games.
Sure thing. So I think I was first introduced to Dungeons and Dragons in 3.5 when I was growing up. My stepfather at the time, I remember him inviting some of his military friends over, and specifically, I have this one memory of him explaining what flaming sphere was, how guiding it around the room and slamming it into people and that sort of thing. And I think just in my early years, there was a big emphasis on fantasy. He would read me Dragonlance and Sojourn, or with the Drizzt Do'Urden Chronicles and that sort of thing. But and I think I experienced that kind of all throughout my childhood. So I was very fortunate in a way to have some experience in that space, and it definitely impacted the way that I look at things creatively. I really love fantasy. I really love sci-fi and just video games in general too. And I think a lot of that was his inspiration. But it was I think that finally getting into the TTRPG space myself is coming off the back of a lot of I mean, there was that whole OGL thing earlier in 2023, in January-ish 2023, and I think that inspired a lot of people to kind of bite the bullet and continue to pursue the creation of a new game. I'm unfortunately one of those folks. There's a lot of us out there, but it's I think we'll talk about it maybe a little bit in depth later. But most recently, I am recently departed from a 7-year games or video game industry career. I worked on PlanetSide 2 as a designer, lead designer, creative director, de facto executive producer. It was a very tumultuous 7 years. Yeah, mostly for the larger organization, less so for the PlanetSide 2 team itself. But I think at the end of it, I was hitting a wall with some burnout. I have a lot of thoughts on how that's affected my outlook on things. But ultimately, I wanted to take some time to myself, just get back to being creative and creating small projects that I can be happy with. One of those was Distal. Originally started as a TTRPG just to play with friends. And we all play Dungeons and Dragons 5th edition, and we all also have opinions about Dungeons and Dragons 5th edition. So I think Distal was originally an attempt to address some of those things and kind of give me a more grounded game, just the experience that I in particular was looking for. And there's only so much homebrew you can throw into 5e before it becomes a different game altogether. So I decided to go a different direction and really just flesh it out as something that feels familiar but is wholly its own.
And what have you found as far as when you're working in a larger company and you're the lead game designer, and you probably aren't able to get your hands in every little kind of facet. You're seeing the overarching product, but in this case, you're really in the weeds of it all. Did you find that refreshing?
So, it's kind of interesting about me, and I don't mean to toot my own horn that much, but because of my unique background or entry into the games industry, I had to learn a lot on my own. I don't have a traditional background or anything. I didn't come up from QA and then go into being a designer. I jumped in. I was doing YouTube prior to just coming over to the games industry, and we were on a very small team to begin with. and I was interacting with all the different departments, so I know a little bit about all the departments when it comes to art. I'm a real jack of all trades, kind of generalist. So, in creating a new project in TTRPG space, I would say that there's a lot of the stuff I'd already kind of been exposed to in some ways. Like, I know how to outsource the art required. I know how to speak with artists, in order to get those relationships to make sense and give them or give me a product that I can use. And have a lot of experience kind of on the marketing side too, and just the social media side. So it made it very easy to make a transition. That is to say, or however, not everything transfers one to one. I think TTRPGs are very interesting because they have such a social layer right on top of the actual game itself, where unlike the people that you're playing against or with online, you have real world relationships that aren't potentially over an internet connection. People you meet every day and have relationships with outside of the game. So you have to design the game in such a way that, it doesn't ruin any of those relationships. You just have to have that in consideration. You can make things too adversarial. If you make things where there's always going to be a loser. Like, how can you still have fun? You know, you don't want to make things too contentious in such a way that it could affect your real life relationships. And just having that sort of understanding, I think, added a lot more fun to the exploration and development of the TTRPG.
And when you like were transitioning and thinking about your future path, did you immediately know that this was the path, or like how long did it take for you to kind of make this creation?
So I'd say no. I started making just a little indie game. I wanted to make a little survival game because I was really excited for Valheim and some of the smart things that they did, and I was really inspired by it. And I started going down that path. Learned Unreal Engine and started making some stuff on my own. But I was also uh, creating Distal. It wasn't Distal at the time. It was something else, or called something else rather. Um, but there was a, I guess, like an inflection point where I could really only devote so much time to one project instead of juggling both. And I became very excited for the TTRPG project. And I was like, you know what, I'm just gonna go for it. Kind of shifted focus. It's yeah, it was a decision. I don't know that it's the most sound decision. Like, just departing from everything that I know over here to try something different, try to immerse myself in the TTRPG community. But I've learned so much, and learning and creating is what makes me really happy.
Did you find any inspiration in the TTRPG space aside from like hacking 5e yourself?
Yeah, so I have had very limited experience with TTRPGs other than Dungeons and Dragons. Like, I played a little bit of Vampire the Masquerade. I've listened to years of uh, podcasts regarding Pathfinder, but that's just so Dungeons and Dragons adjacent that it's hard to count. And I think by just learning more about tabletop role playing games, I was exposed to all sorts of different genres and niche styles of game, and also just the way that people handle different resolutions, and just the understanding, or just even the distinction between like rules light and something that's more rules heavy. It wasn't something that was present, in mind until I started really getting into it. And I I still don't know how I feel about rules light games, and I think that's part of one of the reasons that I'm so excited about Distal is because I like the structure of it. I've tried to play Savage Worlds, which even then it's not a rules light game, but it is more or is less structured than something like Dungeons and Dragons. There's too much imagination involved, I would say. Okay, that's a horrible way to phrase it, but hopefully what I'm trying to get across. But there still wasn't enough structure to really make me excited to, I guess, to break it, because that's what I like doing with games to some degree.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. I mean, Savage Worlds, I would say common knowledge or thought is that Savage World is kind of medium crunch. It's a lot of people find it's that happy medium between like say a Pathfinder versus say an Into the Odd, which is like a lot more rules light. So let's jump in and you can just tell us about Distal uh,
Sweet.
and what the name. Start off with the name. Where'd you come up with that?
Oh man. Okay, so distal, I would like to say that it's like, oh, I mean, it means furthest from center, which like represents some of the things that take place in the game world. But realistically, it's just I was looking for a game name that felt that really clicked with me. Originally, it was called Keystone, and there's too many, I think, negative associations with that when it just comes to like the Keystone pipeline and everything else. You start getting into politic adjacent stuff, even though that doesn't make sense. It's just what comes to mind, at least for me. So I was like, okay, let's try something else. Um, and I was really struggling to find something that could be short, punchy, which represents a lot of. I think of the way that I use my or structure verbiage and the I don't know. It's just I wanted something that felt fun and memorable, easy to kind of understand. And Distal has like a lot of kind of adjacent implications where like you can be, yeah. So dictionary probably means like furthest from center, um, whereas like proximal would be like closest to center. Pretty sure that's the case. Anybody with a medical degree can correct me. Uh, but when thinking of like an adventurer leaving home, going off into the wild, like that's something that kind of resonates there too. So it seemed it seemed good enough to play with, and as I was exploring it more, I think it landed pretty well, at least for me. I do get that question a lot though, and I don't never have a great answer.
And is there like a embedded setting into this, or is it just a rule set?
So I would say that the lore or the setting and the world is probably the weakest part at the moment within the alpha material because I was focusing very heavily on mechanics, which are all very intentionally designed. But it is intended to have its own setting, and even the classes are based in that based in the setting and the way that the world works to a large degree. Um, just for example, one of them is you have a ferryman class, which is inspired from Charon and the River Styx and that sort of thing. But the way that death works in this game, which has mechanical implications as well, is that when somebody goes to zero health, their soul tries to separate itself from the body, and the body begins to like rapidly deteriorate. And uh, and the just the distal plane has kind of been becoming less or more permeated by outside planes. And when anybody dies, they go across the ebb and deep, and the ebb and deep is like this seemingly infinite void of or like just water, like it's an open ocean. And the ferrymen came into being because they needed just the people of the world needed more assurance that their loved ones are going to be able to make it to the other side. They need somebody who can guide their soul. So stuff like that exists kind of throughout all of the classes to greater or lesser degrees. And by the end of it, I hope to have a very specific setting. It's very, very general, very, very broad right now. You can kind of do a lot of whatever you want with it, but I don't know that it'll be that way at the end.
And then I guess I should back up a little bit and say this is going to be on backer kit very shortly. And so as far as that goes, like what's we can get into the time frame later, but this is kind of in philosophy, you're still kind of developing the game before it actually gets into the people's hands.
That's right. Um, so MCDM kind of did something I feel inspiration from. They put their idea for a new RPG on BackerKit and said, "Hey, if people are going to fund it, we'll know you want it." And they have a great history and have created a lot of amazing products. But their game is in alpha right now. People were very excited to have something new, and I felt like that was something that I wanted to explore. For me, I think the stakes are they're a little bit lower because the game is already out. People have been playing it for the better part of maybe not that long, for like at least 6 months. Um, the alpha packet 5 material has been out. People can get that for free right now, so you can see whether or not the game makes sense for your table, and see if you like the way that I write, see if you like how the mechanics are set up, see if you like how things are balanced. And that was something that I felt strongly about too, is just making sure that there is something that feels tangible. It's hard for me to operate on just promises when there are so many unknowns. But for this, the game is not that far from being completed, in my opinion. With enough, I think through the end of the year, quarter 4 is when I plan to have the digital done and sent out. And from here to there, it's going to be a lot of testing, and we're moving into beta, uh, and just kind of fleshing out the world more. But I like what I got, and from what I can tell, people do too.
I was surprised actually, like when I did download the not only the quick start but the alpha, that like you've put a lot of effort and energy into this. That this is not, I would say, compared to Matt Colville, where to me that was like we don't even have a rules set yet. That's like probably not a good approach in my view, but I'll leave that for others to decide. But you've actually got quite a bit of work in place.
Yeah, that was. Uh, I see a lot of games that they usually will just sort of release a very mechanics heavy document, black and white, 2 column text, and just throw everything in there. And I kind of regret not doing that, but at the same time, I'm proud of the work that I've done, because I think it's easier to digest things when there's some sort of visual, component that can help break it up. So, uh, yeah, I feel like there's definitely more game here than some of the alphas out there, and I'm proud of that.
We had a comment come up here from Paul, and just talking about D&D is found lacking in a lot of respects. And I guess the heart of this question is that, the age-old fantasy heartbreaker, right? Like, it's not D&D, but like, what is it? So maybe I'll ask that kind of like really hard question. Like, why is this better or different than D&D? Why should people substitute this instead of like what they know and love, which is 5e? But my channel is all about indie games and getting away from 5e. So here's your chance. Tell us.
Absolutely. So I would say that the experience that you're trying to obtain with Distal is different than that of a 5e. And my big thing is that I want to focus less on heroes and more on the hardships that they face. When I think heroism, I don't think that that's like, oh yeah, you're a hero at level 1 because what? Because people call you that? Like, what happened in your life prior to that 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 people can like look up to you, give you that title? I think when I think of heroism, I think of Lord of the Rings, where it's mostly small people, sometimes powerful people, but they're all struggling in spite of something else, of like self-sacrifice for a greater good, so they can overcome challenges. And in Dungeons and Dragons, and some of the other the RPGs on the horizon, I think Daggerheart's a great example. MCDM is a great example. They try to position the players as heroes already, and that is just not super interesting to me. Like, I don't want to be a superhero. I don't want to be a demigod after a handful of levels. And because of that, that core idea redefined the entirety of the game, to the point where I really couldn't do that with D&D, and I wouldn't be satisfied, because a lot of the mechanics just don't gel with that style of gameplay. You can homebrew it to death, and you might end up with something that you like, but there's a very distinct difference between having a let me put it this way. If I were to tell you, Gary, or invite you rather, to a Call of Cthulhu game, your expectations for that game would be totally different than if I said, we're going to play D&D, but we're going to make it like, Eldritch Horror. And so by creating a new game, you're giving the GM permission to play this style. And you're also giving the players an understanding or an expectation right up front what they plan to be playing. So I think that's a reason to create a new game. When it comes to mechanics, how do you differentiate it from D&D, because D&D can do all sorts of things if change it. I think that the three main points kind of, they almost all center around mechanics. So, well, say for one, so our setting is grounded, not gritty. We don't want to hack your arms off. We don't want you to create characters that inevitably just get destroyed. That's Shadow Dark, and that's some of the OSR games. That's over there. This is not an OSR experience. But I do want to create meaningful stakes at the table. I want you to and the GM to be able to throw challenges in front of the players, hard decisions, and have those players roll with the punches and understand that they need to do that because that's what makes the game fun. We center some mechanics around that experience. For example, one fundamental one is that the way that you level is by trials. So a trial is it's an experience. It's not experience points, though you can. It would basically be like the functional substitution of it. A trial is any sort of extreme hardship that your players would face. So whether that's a difficult no-win situation, maybe diplomacy or otherwise, or maybe they have to grieve the loss of a party member. Everybody is becoming. I think you're shaped by your struggles, and that's the essence of what kind of creates that satisfying character arc for a hero. And maybe just compelling characters in general. And a lot of our game centers around giving you characters that you can latch onto and have a lot of fun with as you discover their journey.
Well, I think a lot of role-playing aficionados love that kind of stuff, is getting into their character. And, it's not about just dice rolling. It's about character development. So it sounds like a good opportunity to me to find a niche within the broader spectrum of fantasy games. And then you also have a shared story.
Yeah, so this kind of leans to I would say that Distal is definitely very combat heavy, tactical in that respect, and we'll talk about it later. But there's also a narrative component, and we center some of the mechanics around that too. One of the first things that you'll do when you're creating a character, you pick a lineage, which is a race or a species, but then you jump right into creating a background for your character. And a background, it is a short two sentences with 4 prompts, and we'll showcase a little bit more about that later. But it gives you mechanical benefits to your character. Also gives you narrative hooks, like very tangible things that the GM or you and the GM can latch onto. And it also keeps you, it makes you less likely to develop tropey characters by virtue of how we structure it. And then you also have a system called organizations, which during your session 0, all the players at your table, as a team building exercise, are going to build a organization with one another. Because all your characters know each other. We just say that right up front. There's no trying to figure it out. And you all have a reason to work together. And the organizations that you develop, maybe you're maybe you're a group of smugglers who are best known for creating a mess, but also getting the job done. And that's your reputation is maybe it's just locally, or maybe it's within secret circles. And developing an organization during your session 0 determines all that. So it grounds not just your characters in the world, but your characters as a group, and defines their reputation right from the start. So we're trying to frame the experience that you're then going to be able to participate in.
Which a lot of games have trouble with, because it's always okay, well, where do we start? Well, in a tavern, as the standby goes. But so in this organization, it almost puts you on that path right off the bat.
Absolutely, because that's, I think, a more interesting place to start the characters. Even the backgrounds, they catch us up on your the events and circumstances and traumas that you endured up to the point where you became an adventurer. And then that's kind of where we're picking up that story from. Maybe a little bit after that. That's kind of up to you. And then this last mechanic that we have, so a good meal with friends, a very long name, but it is essentially this is how we handle long rests in the game. Basically, when nighttime comes, it's about all of your characters will sit down and they'll have a good meal with friends. It's a time to tell stories. It's a time to mentor other characters that might be less experienced. It's a time to like repair your armor and just lick your wounds and that sort of thing. And we even in the mechanics say, okay, you get a good meal with friends if you're in a relatively safe space at night with and then everybody in the group contributes something. So and this is just strictly role play. Character says like I'm going to go off into the forest and grab a deer. I'm going to because they're the ranger and uh, they want to share that part of their fantasy, their character fantasy. It just gives you a little window and kind of formalizes it a little bit for you. So those are some narrative based mechanics. We also have some other stuff like initiative, for example, is the way that you enter combat is most likely through the story that's being told. So when you hear an arrow whiz by your head, something that the GM says, then that's probably the enemy that's taken the first shot, or maybe you're taking the first response to it because they shot at you and missed or whatever. And then we enter like a staggered initiative and that sort of thing. But there's a lot of little components like that. So it's very much a hybrid of storytelling and I guess the more combat side.
Okay, and so character backgrounds. A lot of games nowadays, in the indie space in particular, they have like random tables to get you some hooks to get you interested in your character right off the bat and give you some direction instead of like somebody coming to the table with, "Hey, I just wrote 2 pages of backstory" type of thing. So, just tell us about like kind of what people could expect on these.
Okay. So your background is like I said before, it's 2 sentences with 4 prompts. We encourage you to roll on these tables. And that also helps set the tone for the game. You can, if you want to, min max, you can pick and choose and that sort of thing. That's always available. But you'll create an interesting story that, or an interesting character that is worthy of adventure just by rolling on these tables and seeing how you interpret things. The level of specificity here is super important because if you do it too vague, like a single word, a lot of games do that, or it's just like sunflower. It's like, okay, what does that make you think of? Then you have to write things down. We're more specific than that. But at the same time, if you do it too specific, then you don't leave any room for interpretation. So we were very mindful of the level of specificity that goes into the backgrounds being generated here. And I thought that it would be super fun to have you, Gary, roll up a character background. I have the alpha packet, which again, totally free. Everybody can follow along if you want to download it.
Links are below in the details for everybody.
Awesome. But Gary, why don't you? Let's see. I don't have chat open, but I'm gonna write this down as we go.
Okay.
And the first prompt, or the first part of the first prompt, is "I grew up." Prompt, and roll 1d20.
Okay. Here we go. 13, lucky 13.
Okay. So, and this might set the tone for the world too. I grew up abused by my owners. So that's what you ended up with.
Okay.
And so aside from that short snippet, it would also impart a number of benefits, like you'd gain +1 performance, +1 survival, and a +1 a Nemesis Contact, which we could talk briefly about contacts later. But so I grew up abused by my owners. Why don't you roll 1d6?
2.
Okay, and then roll 1d10.
4.
Okay, so I grew up abused by my owners, and my days were spent blank. So you rolled a 4. And my days were spent plotting against my enemies.
Okay.
So that's the first sentence that you've landed on. And plotting against my enemies would be like it'd give you a +1 to deduction, a +2 to strategy, a +1 to weapon proficiency. So just with this first sentence, who do you think that their enemies were? or like how would you interpret that sentence?
Let's. I'm going to tie them both together. My enemies actually are my owners.
Okay.
So I was abused. Let's just say I grew up as a orphan. Let's say that, and whoever was in charge of the orphans, I was abused by, and now I'm plotting my revenge against them because I don't want them to abuse any more children.
Nice. I can dig it. Okay, so let's roll on to so the second sentence, which starts out, I became, and roll 1d6.
A 5.
Okay, so I became a villain, which, so full disclosure, this part of the prompt, this 1d6, is like it says an adventurer, a nomad, a sellsword, a hero, a villain, a soldier. It's really, this is the part where I'm like, you can pick whatever prompt you want. It's mostly to give you a specific loadout. So you'll get like a bunch of items and weapon proficiencies and that sort of thing, kind of to make sure that everybody has enough equipment to begin adventuring with. But if you stick with it, I became a villain. The day, and then roll 1d6 again.
6.
Okay, and then roll 1d10.
9.
Oh, I got lost underground. Okay, I think you're Batman. So what do you think? I became a villain the day I got lost underground.
Well, let's say the orphanage hired me out to do cave work as a young person that could scurry through small spaces, and then I got lost and separated, and that's where I guess realized that they did not have my best interest at my heart, and that I should maybe take it out against them.
Interesting. Okay. Yeah, I could dig it. So that is the background creation process. And there's a lot of different combinations you can come up with. A lot of them are, you can interpret them in a lot of different ways. What's funny is that I feel like your specific sort of line is, I feel like there's, maybe that one's a little bit too specific. Maybe. They could always, it's alpha, we can always adjust. But I really like that that twist with like, oh, they would send me underground and I could fit through small spaces. It's awesome. Cool. But that's backgrounds, and actually the next slide just has the next page of backgrounds there too. So one of the things that you did pick up though is it's a Nemesis Contact. So contacts in the game are there's separate tables that you can roll them up on. It's very quick. I don't show any of that here, but I'll just give an example of a contact real quick. So for the Nemesis Contact, actually, why don't you just roll me a d10 3 times? We'll make it quick.
Okay. 4, 10, and 5.
4, 10, and 5. Okay, so your Nemesis Contact, it would say they are a scoundrel that is employed by a monarch and has a network of informants. So this is maybe the person that you're trying to kill, or maybe like how I would interpret it is say like, oh, maybe they found out that I got away, from the orphanage, and they're trying to find me and bring me back. So that gives it would give the GM something to say, or to incorporate into the campaign. It'd give the player some sort of investment in like fleshing out that character, and having just personal interactions that evolve your character over time. So we give a lot of permission in this game. I feel like things that you can, instead of having to have the GM say like, okay, please give me your backstory, we just help you create it. You don't have to make up who your parents were and that sort of thing. You probably can take it further, but the GM can say like, okay, that you have this one solid hook. I'm going to pull that into the campaign, and it's going to be totally justified because that's what you rolled.
Well, I love me some random tables to create a character. I think every game should do that personally. So yeah, don't come at me with 2 pages of backstory before you even start playing.
Right. All right, let's talk about combat in Distal. It is a very tactical game, and the action economy is very similar to Dungeons and Dragons. Uh, this game was designed very intentionally to be able to take an existing table of Dungeons and Dragons players, Pathfinder players, and give them uh, port them over to the game, basically, and they'd be able to pick it up no problem, super easy. So tactical combat, I think some of the we do a lot of things different mechanically. So all of the rules are relevant and would need to be learned, but the pace and the flow you should be able to key in on it pretty easily. We streamlined the gameplay a lot so that we avoid some of the shortcomings of that have kind of just been well known throughout the Dungeons and Dragons 5e community. For example, if you are you're a fighter, low levels, uh, your turns are pretty quick, but you gain so many attacks at later levels, and casters gain so many spells at later levels that the higher level play is just very long, sloggy. Turns take forever, and that was just one of those things that we're intentional about, where we say that okay, every character, if you're using two weapons, you have two attacks. If you're using a two-handed weapon, you have one two-handed weapon attack, and then that very rarely deviates. For the actual play in particular, you take turns in a staggered initiative order, and the players determine who goes first. It's not popcorn initiative necessarily. I think popcorn is, as it was described to me at least, is like everybody's choosing who goes all the time. Not the case in this. We figure out who goes first, and then it's like it's your team, it's the enemy's team to pick a creature that goes. That would be relevant to the story. Like if we're just rolling initiative, the goblin that's all the way at the back of the room that is totally minding its own business might have the highest roll. And then as a GM, I'd have to jump through hoops to figure out why they're the first ones to respond. Same thing with like, okay, well, the cleric in Dungeons and Dragons, and they rolled the highest. So like, I guess they have to either hold their turn or they have to do what, I'm not sure. And that can feel a little bit deflating. So we've engineered it in such a way that the players, when it's their team's turn, they pick somebody to go, and then it locks them into that initiative order. Enemies go, lock somebody into that initiative order, and that's just back and forth. And once everybody has gone, we just loop back through that list again. So if there's any sort of and then we also say like if there's any sort of argument over who should go, then you just roll off and figure out who goes from there. It kind of goes back to that. But there's a lot of intentional streamlining that's done for the sake of balance, and then also the kind of the more grounded, I guess, progression in the game. So we have different tiers of play. If characters are like levels 1 through 4, they'll be fighting these types of monsters if you want to give them an equivalent challenge. And then they're going to tiers, or levels 5 through 7, they'll fight these sorts of monsters, and it'll kind of just go up like that. And your health bumps occur at those milestone levels too. So actually at 4, you get your first health bump. At 8, you get your next health bump or something like that.
I guess I should quickly just jump in here and ask of the leveling, and you might have it on a later slide. But so this is really designed for like long-term like campaigns, correct?
That's right. Distal does its best to work over long form or like multi-session campaigns, and a lot of that is because of the mechanics and also the feeling of the world. So as far as mechanics, just a great example is death marks. So when characters go to 0 health in this world, they get knocked over and they start accruing death marks. These are permanent marks against your character. If you get too many, you die forever. The sweet forever sleep. But if you reach 0 health, you can get healed and kind of brought back. But it becomes more difficult to do that over time. And then there's no yo-yo healing. Like when you heal somebody and stabilize them, there's a certain amount of time that it takes for them to recover and enter the fight. So really, you're trying to ablate damage or mitigate it as it comes in instead of falling over and getting healed and picked back up. It's something that one of those problems that I was trying to address from 5e. And by virtue of having your character accrue these death marks over time, a number of things happen. One is that they lose access to skills that they were previously proficient in. So it's still not good to fall over, but it is more forgiving in a way where, unlike D&D, if you have 3 death saves, you're just dead forever. This is more like you're going to suffer a long-term death. Your character is very likely going to change their outlook on the world because of the hardship that they have incurred. Just they might be gun shy about getting in the face of people again, or that their allies might be trying to protect them more often because they know that they're on their last legs. So there's some kind of interpersonal interaction just at the table within the party to how much do you care about your allies falling over.
So I'm thinking like the character is beat up, scarred, limps, whatever the case might be, and then eventually like you decline or age, I guess, for lack of a better term, to the point where like either your character doesn't make sense, you retire them, or you have that final death mark.
Absolutely, yeah, and we mentioned that in the document as well. Like retirement is an option. So is that blaze of glory. Kind of going out on that high note, and hopefully we send your weapons and armor back to your family. Bring in a new character, and we also, just because of how the world is, you could have an apprentice or like a family member that comes in to take your place, and you could start them at a lower level, and that would be less punishing in this game than it is in something like Dungeons and Dragons, where the progression is a little bit more exponential. And
have you found that sweet spot? Like I know, like D&D, levels like 3 to 7, people really typically like to kind of play that because you're not too powerful, but you're not also just dying instantly. So have you had enough long-term testing to kind of determine like where people are at with that?
I would say no. So that's definitely something that we will need to feel out through testing. And I don't think that we're, I wish we could fast forward time and like run a year-long campaign and say that this is, no, this is working great. And honestly, I don't know the answer to that. But I have played enough D&D to where I understand some of the things that make me a little bit hesitant to jump into like either higher level play or hang on to a character for that long. And quite frankly, I think that the lower level play has always been a little bit more interesting for me, and in Dungeons and Dragons in particular, probably because there's more risk associated with losing a character, and you have less capability to, you're less of a demigod. So we try to maintain the core of that kind of throughout the experience. You're going to fight monsters that are, some of them are going to be super nasty, and you will need to make a choice whether or not you actually want to fight them or if you want to, live. So.
And now I have on the screen here, like one side for prep play and one side for the play. Now, is this a he said, she said, where you flip it completely over to get to the other side, or is it actually two?
No, you flip it over. Yeah, you straight up, like there's so you read it from 2 directions basically. And I'm gonna pitch you on this because it's definitely unorthodox. So in the hardcover that we plan to release, it is meant to basically be 2 books in one. The first side is the side for prep. Is everything that you do before a session. It's everything that you read up on when you're either planning your encounters or creating your characters, or even just like the shopping that might occur between sessions and that sort of thing. We try to keep that information over there somewhere, and then keep the core rules, the stuff that you need to access very quickly, the reference tables, and the just all that the information that I guess you could almost separate it into like, okay, this side's for players and this side's for GM, but there's so much overlap with some of that information that doesn't really make sense. The goal would be to be able to hand off the book to a player and then be able to instantly find what they're looking for. When they're looking up a rule, it'll be the first few pages. It won't be page 171, which is what the Dungeons and Dragons PHP, book is. It's just like in the book, in the middle of the book somewhere. Of course, bookmarks are a thing. People are used to that. You can bend page corners, you can use sticky notes, but you still go through that loop of like explaining to where the information is. Like, oh no, check, that sticky note, it's the blue one, over here. No, not that one, it's the other one. And I'm just trying to avoid some of that. So a little bit unorthodox, but other media has done this. So you look at manga, it's 2 stories in one on occasion. If you look at children's books, of course. And then also I've seen some, not TTRPG, but other board games and like card games have different sets of rules. Usually it's for asymmetrical games that are played in 2 different ways. Like, okay, this person is playing this role and this is their rules, and these are theirs. But I think that the same premise can be applied to a TTRPG. Like, that's, as long as it's structured well, as long as the organization has clear distinction, one side or the other. But at the very least, it's going to be the most interesting book on your shelf.
I would say that I've not seen this before myself, so I'm interested to see how this plays out. And as like a graphic designer myself, if you came to me with this, I'd be like, oh man, I don't know if I want to deal with this, because you would, in theory, then correct me if I'm wrong, you would need 50% for characters and players, and then 50% the other way. And if you don't have enough content to fill, how would you maximize or use that space?
Oh no, so to be clear, okay, well now that's going to be a little bit of display. Like, so a spread is on the back side of that spread is not the other side of the book.
Okay.
Is that making sense?
Well, I might have to see this, because like
Okay.
I'm thinking of like those old he said she said books, where it was like you flip it and on one page it's the boy's story, and then on the other page it's her story, and then like
Gotcha.
so
Okay,
you
it's
both
not that.
different sides. No, okay.
It's not that. So like, yeah, basically divide. So you take the book, you flip it over, and then the first page that you read is like, it's the core rules, and it'll be the core rules all the way down to wherever the core rules stop.
Okay.
In the book. So this is one of those things where my existing audience was like, either I don't understand, or like, I'm not quite sure. So I definitely get it. And I hope
We're gonna
that
have
I'm
to do a
making the
flip
right
through.
choice.
We're gonna need a flip through for this.
Yeah, for sure.
And I think we had some just like I kind of insinuated there, but anyways, I think we'll get that flip through, and we'll figure that out. And then like we had mentioned, the alpha is available to check it out. I downloaded it and I looked through it, and like I said, it's quite comprehensive already. So you're not coming at this with absolutely nothing in your back pocket here. You've actually got quite a bit of work done. And just tell us about the art and the artist that we've been seeing displayed throughout.
Sure. Yeah. So I would say art is the biggest challenge that I will face in this particular project. It is not AI generated. I did lean on some of that stuff early days, and came to a very quick understanding that no, this is not the way. This is not the way of doing things. So the Traders Do Beginner's Adventure module, that's stock art. And honestly, I couldn't tell you who the artist is off the top of my head. The art that's in the middle is from somebody on Fiverr named Ivan, and also made sure that wasn't AI. But the character pieces that you saw throughout the slideshow, so that's the one of the strategist and just the Atlian woman, those are done by Gray Herb, who has done amazing work for Pathfinder in the past, and has been my go-to artist. Very easy to work with. Let's see, there was on the combat slide, there was a big magical bear that's done by Laylamon, who was also on Fiverr, and she does amazing work. and then I think we saw a another stock art piece on which was gotten from Drive Through RPG for like a dwarven character that was on one of the background pages. So that's that is definitely the challenge. Everything that aside from the actual cost of shipping books and printing them, that's what the backer kit funds go to. Is my so when the campaign goes live, 18,000 is the goal that I'm setting. However, unless we like really surpass that, there's only so much art you can get for that in a book that needs to be as robust and vivid as the one that I'm trying to create. So I hope that the project does well. I hope that the people are interested enough to help support it. And I think we've got a pretty good crew so far, and hopefully the game brings something that you're not seeing often in the modern D20 space.
And so I have to ask, you've got I think 60,000 followers on YouTube. You've got like over 10 years of experience at Planetside, and you've got like quite a following. What do you think the Venn diagram of your existing followers versus potentially new folks that are into tabletop role playing games, or do you think you're going to be able to uh, capture some of that audience and bring them along?
So I think it's going to be very difficult. I'll tell you right now, based on the video performance that I've been like, I've put some videos out talking about the development of Distal and kind of like advertising the game and talking about it. That is a very slim overlap with my previous content. There's a lot of factors for it though. Like I hadn't posted anything to my YouTube channel for like 5 years, and people forgot that I existed. And then the channel was developed before the time that they added like the notification bell. So my videos don't even show up to the majority of my audience nowadays. So it's I would say that it's more a tool for me uh, to be able to share information about the game and kind of just keep it up for posterity's sake, and less of trying to bring my audience over. Um, Hopefully, we can capture more of them, but I think that the advertising for this game is really going to be grassroots more than anything. I'm just reaching out to content creators such as yourself every day and trying to build momentum. A lot of folks are interested, but it pales in comparison to some of the behemoths that are out there right now.
Well, I think as you have either discovered or you will discover, tabletop role playing game is a very niche of a niche hobby, and I know it's difficult. And I mean, that's partly why I put this channel together, was to give a voice to indie game designers that are not like Wizards of the Coast or some of the bigger players. So I wish you the best here in developing this game. And what is it, just the book on your backer kit, or is it going to be, do you have any special like stretch goals, surprises, extras?
Yeah. So the hardcover, shipping the game in hardcover and digital is the main goal, and there are a few stretch goals, more with just like additional content to flesh it out. But actually, if we reach the 25K mark, I'm hiring on another designer to help create a mini setting. Her name is Mandari. She streams on Twitch a lot. Very talented homebrew content creator in her own right. So very excited to hopefully get to be able to employ her to help with a small setting for Distal.
Cool. Well, and when does it launch again? To remind folks.
Wednesday. So it's going on the April 24th at 7 p.m. Eastern time.
And why did you choose backer kit versus Kickstarter or other funding sources?
I saw what MCDM did, and I was just really impressed with their setup. But one feature really stood out to me. It's the launch party feature. So 7 p.m. Eastern time on Wednesday, I'm going to live stream the launch of the game, and that gets embedded right in the actual launch party or the campaign page, which is awesome. It seems so much more exciting to be able to interact with everybody in real time. And BackerKit has a really cool community, has really cool features, and a platform has been used to help support Kickstarter in the past, but last year they broke off and now they're
Mhm.
their own crowdfunding platform, and they've started gaining a lot of momentum. Uh, and I don't know, it's just I enjoy that platform more, which
It seems
you know,
more geared towards the creator than
yeah,
Kickstarter. I find I know they've been putting out a number of kind of seminars, I guess, webinars recently, and so I've signed up for those, and I've watched a couple of them, and they're really good. They talk you through all their services and the marketing. So I mean, it's a pitch for their system that they've got in place. But anyways, I always found BackerKit does seem to be the one that they're trying to be in the best interest of creators. Obviously,
for
they
sure.
take their cut, but you got to provide a service and make some money from that. So, anyways, Rel, I just want to say thank you for coming on the show and game pitch, and wish you the best of luck with your game, and I'm sure it's going to be a big hit.
Thank you.
And if you are an indie game designer and you want to come on Game Pitch and talk about your game, all you have to do is go to www.daikugames.com and tell them Game Pitch Gary sent you.
Hey friends, are you looking for a game that is not Dungeons or Dragons? Well, we got exactly what you need at Daiku Game Pitch. We got zines, we got OSR, we got adventures. But wait, there's more. We got solo games, we got journaling games, we even got card games and dice games. Oh hell, I don't even know what kind of game this is, but we got it. And if you visit us in the next 2 minutes, you're gonna get all the Zine Quest, Zine Months, Itch Fund, and Backer Kits Kickstarters that you can handle. Visit us at www.daikugames.com and tell them Game Pitch Gary sent ya.